Hey, my name is Hendrik Booz, and I'm going to be your son or daughter's IB English Literature HL2 teacher this year. A little picture of me and my family up there in the corner. Let's get to it. If you could, I'd like you to go ahead and share something with me about your student using this web address, tinyurl.com/1920, or the school year 2019, 2020. Booz, capital BOOZ, capital BTSN for back to school night. If there's anything you want me to know about your son or daughter, then by all means, please do so. This is my family right here, my wife, Kelly, a daughter who just started school herself in Alexandria, Madeline, William, and he doesn't like to wear shirts, but you know what? Who does in the summer? So a little bit about me. I'm from Fairfax, was born in Fairfax Hospital, went to Fairfaxville Elementary School, went to Lanier Middle School, went to Fairfax High School like my sister, like my brother-in-law. My dad taught at Robinson. My aunts both taught in Fairfax County. My mother went to Annandale, and my uncle went to Falls Church. My aunt went to Madison, and my other aunt went to McLean, and they never moved from the same house on Gallows Road. So they have all gone to different high schools in Fairfax County. My wife works in education. We're pretty much lifers around here, although we live in Alexandria. I teach HL2 third period and seventh period. So I got to fix that right there. I'm also the CAS coordinator, which is the Creativity, Activity, and Service coordinator for the IB diploma program. And then I teach after school, junior and senior TOK, senior in the fall, and then second semester spring I teach the juniors Mondays and Thursdays from 3 to 4:45, and then on top of that on Tuesday evenings I teach an online honors course for Fairfax County English 12. So seniors all first semester. I've been in the county for a little over 20 years, not including the 13 that I went through from kindergarten through high school. So I've spent, almost 85% of my life in Fairfax County Public Schools. I ended up going down to UVA to get a BA in English and a concentration in American Studies. And then I also have my Master's of Teaching with a dual Master's of English, actually, in secondary English education and the American West. So let's get into what your son or daughter can do and what you can do to help each other. Hopefully you've signed up for SIS Parent View, which allows you to see your kids' grades. They are always checking their grades, and we're going to try to actively kind of move them off of checking those grades this year. If you haven't already done so, you can sign up for an observer account in Blackboard, and Blackboard is simply the 24/7 learning platform that Fairfax County uses. We've migrated a lot of our materials off of Blackboard onto Google Classroom, and by we I mean Mr. Mohan and I, my team teacher. But you can find things that you need here, like the agendas, course outcomes. We also have this year's syllabus available to you, and then the calendar in case you need those things. Like I said, though, most of what we've done is move toward Google Classroom, and in Google Classroom and on our website, your students can find everything that they need for class. So they have the syllabus here, and these are all dynamic things. They're summer assignments. It's a little slow to load, but first semester materials, and that includes their daily calendar, which we've done through the end of January, and they understand that. You can see we have August and September worked out for them. They know what they're doing in October. Anything in yellow is going to be a major assessment, so they know what's in front of them. November, December, all the way into January when we finish the semester, and things settle down a little bit as they start entering and submitting their college applications. We have daily agendas every day, and so every day when students come into class, they can see exactly what they're doing. I use these to try to keep kids on the right track, and if they miss class, they're always welcome to look at these, and so I add to these every day, and that's something that they have available to them on our Google website. This Back to Night slideshow is available to them as well, and I have a second semester calendar, but it's really for last year, and so we'll modify those dates as we go. That being said, because we're using Google Classroom, anything that they need is going to be available on one of their one-to-one computers, the computers that we gave them. They can submit their classwork on Google Classroom, and you can see they have some written assignment things that are due for the back to school night, which is September 11th. On that week, that Friday, they have to hand in their written assignment, which they did last year. So we have a copy of it. And then I have some drafts of some things coming up. So everything is available online to them. There's almost nothing in class except for any notes that they may be taking. And we try to share those as often as possible. Back to the slideshow. The main focus for this course is that students are able to work analytically with literature. We're trying to work on both their speaking and their written clarity, and then obviously their ability to think and structure arguments, but also then structure arguments in terms of the organization, transitions between points, balance to their paragraphs, things that are really going to help them in college. Ideally, they know a ton of content about specific authors, but they also know how to analyze literature in general. So for the paper 2, which we'll get to in a little bit, they're going to read 4 novels. They've already read 2, hopefully over the summer. Beloved by Toni Morrison, Nobel Prize winner, recently passed away. And then Per Peterson, a Norwegian author who wrote It's Fine by Me. Then in the spring, they're going to read As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, another Nobel Prize winner, and City of Glass by Paul Auster, which is a metafictive work. It's a little bit different, written in the 80s, that we try to use. We try to mix up things that are kind of traditional and classic with lesser-known works, partially so that kids can't just Google things and find a lot of this information online, but they have to think, and they're kind of engaging in another culture's texts. Here's what they can expect. We have about an hour of homework a week, and that really actually ends up being only reading. There's very little written work outside of class, very little preparation. We really want to kind of subscribe to the Finnish model, if you will, that everything should be done in class. They're spending so much time in our class that we want to give them some freedom to do whatever they need to for their other classes outside of it. But we do all of their major assessments in class, and that means that they are handwritten for the most part, unless they have accommodations, in 2-hour chunks. So if your student's in 3rd period, we accommodate that using parts of the earlier part of the day and then learn sometimes after school. They're going to write an essay or 2 every quarter. Some students will write more than that just because they want to have some chances for reassessment, something I'll go over in a little bit. But they can expect feedback on their essays. They can expect us to be available, and that's, obviously Mr. Booz, Mr. Mohan, during class, and obviously in Learn. And they can have one opportunity for reassessment. They don't get to redo or revise anything, but they can take a whole nother in-class essay if they need to, at least once per quarter, for those that are concerned about the quality of their writing, their grades, etc. And in reaching out to students from the past, we have asked them to kind of tell us what they got from this course. So what we're happy about is that students are finding deeper connections, not just in books that they're reading, but in art and film, music, theater. Obviously, mostly literature, because we do a lot of books and reading. As far as their oral clarity, students are going to speak at least once a week, every single student, because our focus for the IOCD, or the internal oral commentary and discussion, is for students to be able to speak on their own for 6 to 8 minutes without prompting, and then respond in another segment of that 20-minute period for the IOCD to our questions about some secondary texts, and I'll go over that in a little bit. So people are able to think on their feet. Ideally, what kids are learning how to do is work with logic. Sometimes they have ideas that are a little bit abstract, or they're trying to force them a little bit too much. And so we want to make sure that they're both valid and logical. And then critical thinking is a key that our students leave our class with. Sometimes kids are just funny. Tell your parents that if I'm doing well in college, then anyone else in your class this year will be fine. I'm not sure if this helps, but it's something. So our kids are typically high flyers in the sense that they are really working hard. They've chosen higher level for this literature course, which really just means there's a slight change, a slight difficulty in the rubrics, the descriptors for class, or how we grade them, and they read a little bit more than a student would in standard level. So we do a lot of paper 2 practice in the first 2 or 3 weeks of school. This week, the back to school week, September 12th and September 13th, they will write their first paper 2. They've had these prompts over the summer, and so we've applied them to the 2 texts, and this is a way for us to kind of gauge their writing skills and where we need to work with them. During the entire first semester, the main focus that we have is the IOCD and the paper 1. The written commentary is there, as I said, we wanted them to just kind of give it to us. They can revise that on their own. We do Gwen Harwood's poetry, and we'll give them a packet of her work. She's an Australian poet who primarily deals with things like social hierarchy, academia, She's very classical, uses a lot of classical allusions in her work, and she's very formal in her structure. Then we're working with Sweat, a play by Lynn Nottage, who actually is a back-to-back Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright from America. And this is about socioeconomic divisions in Pennsylvania, mainly based on steel and coal and things like that. She won the Pulitzer Prize for this play. Running in the Family is a memoir slash fictional piece by Michael Ondaatje, a Sri Lankan Canadian author who's primarily known for The English Patient, and we work a lot with metafiction and introduction to metafiction there, which is really where authors are self-referential or talking about writing. During the second semester, we review a little bit with Beloved and It's Fine by Me, and as I said, we move on to As I Lay Dying by Faulkner and City of Glass by Auster. They have, your students have ISBN numbers for the 6 pieces that they're going to need right now, and you're welcome to get those from me if you need them by email. Every day they walk in and there's some sort of daily agenda. As I showed you before, they know what's going on. I try to make it somewhat visual, so we know what students expect of us, but we hopefully they know what to expect when they walk into the classroom. Everything is there on Google Classroom, as I said before. We use expectations and course outcomes, and those course outcomes are a way for us to have a conversation with students about their grades, but they also know exactly what we expect of them. Everything we do is tied to the major assessments. So the IOCD, the paper 1 and the paper 2, the paper 1 and the paper 2 being the exams that they're going to take in May. We feel like these are really valid exams. The paper 1 is a blind literary commentary, which means that they're just literally reading a page from maybe a novel or a short story or a poem, and they get to pick one of those two, and then they analyze what they think that poem or that prose passage is about. We always do those blind, meaning they've never seen them before, so that we're working with kids' ability to analyze and assess literature. The paper 2 is a synthetic essay, so there's prompts that they're working with. For instance, what are the uses and abuses of power in 2 of the books you've read? They do not have the books in front of them, and after the first quarter, they do not have the prompts beforehand. So we're again working blindly, meaning we want the students to have to figure out in the 2-hour span that they're going to have for the essay and the exam exactly what their argument's going to be based on that prompt. The IOP is from 11th grade, and IB sets this up a little bit differently. Almost always, a student's 11th grade IOP, or internal oral presentation, is slightly higher in terms of its mark than the IOCD, because they have time to prepare, they're able to use notes. The IOCD is a 20-minute preparatory period for one of the poems from Harwood, that Australian poet I mentioned earlier, and then they walk across the library or part of the school. They walk into a room, and either Mr. Mohan or I are in front of them. I will take care of all of my students. He will take care of all of his. And students have 20 minutes, 10 minutes to discuss the poem. Hopefully we're having them speak, as I said, 6 to 8 minutes on their own. I'll then ask them questions for 2 to 4 minutes. A timer will go off, and then we'll immediately move to either Sweat by Lynn Nottage or Running in the Family. And the students do not know which one of those we're going to pick. We make sure that we spread that out equally amongst all of the candidates. And I just start asking them questions. How does characterization play into the play that you read? And they have to kind of respond using their own ideas about the text. And then from there, I tailor the subsequent questions that we're going to have for the remaining 9 minutes and 30 seconds of that discussion. These are both done on a 25-point or 30-point scale eventually, but I'll show you this 25-point scale in a moment. We add the 2 together and then divide by 2 to come to a score so that students get an IA or an internal assessment score. Then they'll have a paper 1 and a paper 2, and you can see they're in categories. They're at the A level, the B level, the C level. So if a student may have, say, 2 C's right here, I know that's not what you want to hear, but when I talk to them, and then they did really well on a paper 1, let's say they did an A. Is that a C plus or a B minus? Well, we can have a conversation about that based on how well maybe they did their formative work. Maybe they didn't do so well on all their formative work, which typically we refer to as homework in the past or prep work. That's probably going to be a C plus. But if they really did all of their formative work, and we typically have 5 to 6 kind of homework assignments, but we do a lot of them in class, that sounds more like maybe that's a B minus for that student. So what we try to do is come to meet the students where they need to be met. Give them some scaffolding in the first quarter because we know that college is a huge deal for them and they're really nervous about their grades there, and then have those discussions. We're really happy with our progress over the past couple years, and we must say we're not trying to get cocky or anything, but we have by far the highest scores of any school in Fairfax County for the HL2 exam, and you can see them all listed there. Our school average is 5.61. That's hovering at the B plus range. County average, obviously 4.91, well above the world. We're a full point above the world, which we're proud of. Last year, we had 7 kids get a perfect score in 11. 2% of the world earns that score, so we're happy that we're vastly beating those percentages. The bulk of our students, the majority of our students, are going to earn a 6, as you see right here, and they have for a couple of years now. So we're really pleased with our scores, but we're also pleased that we're working with literature that's really strong and tests that assessments that are really strong as well. So the first semester, they're going to have 2 mock paper 1s, and as I said before, there's a prose passage and a poem, and they get to pick one of those 2. They're going to definitely do 1 mock paper 2, which is coming up this week, September 12th and 13th. If they really didn't like how well they did on that, then they have a second chance in October to write another one. It will be with different prompts, rather. Excuse me, different prompts. And if they really, really don't like either of those 2 scores, they'll have a third opportunity before the semester so that their semester marks, their 7th semester marks, the ones that are sent to most of the colleges to which they've applied, if they're applying regular decision, they can raise those grades. So again, we really try to make sure that the students have some time. So here are 2 of the examples of that mock paper 2 prompt that I referenced before, and these are specifically the prompts that we're using this year. We added a third to try to help kids. I'm going to read one to you just so you understand kind of the complexity. We often talk, I'm reading number 8, we often talk of characters arriving at some moment of epiphany with reference to at least 2 works of the fiction you have studied. Compare the means by which our attention is drawn to these moments and the impacts within the work. So students are talking about narrative structure, narrative style, narrative strategy, narrative points of view. They're talking about structure in terms of flashbacks. They're talking about plots, what's happening within the text, characterization in terms of the means by which. But the focus of this is what an epiphany is. Some kids may think an epiphany is something as simple as a realization, when an epiphany actually has a little bit more of a nuanced denotation. An epiphany has to have some sort of effect and change the person in denotative fashion. That's what an epiphany is. It's not just realizing that maybe you're really bad at giving compliments to somebody. Well, that's a realization. But an epiphany is going to be the effects of me not giving compliments actually makes people feel less about themselves. I need to change that. And so we talked a little bit about that over the past couple of weeks in looking at the nuances of these questions. So they'll have 2 hours to write an essay based on these one of these prompts. There'll be 3, 7, 8, and 9. Your kids have either chosen 7, 8, or 9. They just pick one. And they write. And we like to see at least 4 to 6 pages from students. Students who are earning the 6s and 7s are typically writing 6 to 10 handwritten pages on IB paper, which seems like a lot, but they're pretty used to it by this point in their high school career. As I said before, we're reading these 4 books: As I Lay Dying, Beloved, It's Fine by Me, City of Glass. Students will eventually in the second semester write 2 more paper 2s. One where they must address As I Lay Dying, and another one where they must address City of Glass. So they will have written on all 4 at least one time, 3 total papers minimum, by the end of the school year, meaning that they walk into the May 3rd and 4th exams having taken the paper 1, having taken the paper 2, so they don't feel as blinded by that game time, if you will, when they walk into those exams. As I said before, we have calendars in Blackboard, so you're more than welcome to use that. Everything they've done is on Google Classroom, and now that we have one-to-one, meaning the computers that Fairfax County issued them, we're going to use those in class quite a bit. And here's how you can actually further help me. My sister's just recently sent her second daughter off to Wake Forest. And she was also a college counselor, and she talks to me all the time about the importance of sleep, not only for myself with a 7 and a 4-year-old, but also for our students here at Marshall, or really all high school students. So please make sure they're sleeping, even if they're IB diploma candidates and say they can, or they're taking a bunch of IB classes. They need sleep. It's not going to matter if they miss a homework or 2. And if your teachers need some help understanding that, I will reach out to some of their teachers. We need some patience. They are under incredible stress, especially as they apply to college. There are deadlines. These are hard deadlines that they must meet. So obviously, take that with a grain of salt. I inherently trust all of these kids. We do everything in class so that we don't have to worry about plagiarism. We don't want them to do very much work at home, not only because they have very little time, but also because we want them to be able to trust us that we care about their time. So that's not just trust in an academic setting, it's also trust in terms of being kind of personal, having personal relationships with them. You and I are a team. Together, we're going to help these kids get across that stage in June 1st, first school to graduate this year, not the last. Or what my grandmother called the GGG method, something that my wife made me put on my license plate. Just trying to be good, giving, and gracious, things that I have a really difficult time working with, but maybe you can help to force that yourselves. So again, I have resources available to you. If you need any further information, have your students show you this website. Everything that I've talked about is all right here, and they have more than enough information to kind of understand what's going on in class and then get handouts if they miss class or get some sort of help or work with their peers. Thanks a lot for listening to this video. If you weren't able to make it, if you need to reach out to me, my email is whboos@fcps.edu, and I hope you guys are having a great year so far. Go Statesman.